Hello and welcome to another Spirit of Nature art video tutorial, and it is part 2 of the Botanicals, Butterflies and Bugs folio. Last time we focused on the central structure, and this time we're going to head over to that left hand flap and look at this little mini journal and the pocket to put it in. So this little mini journal here has just been made with the offcut of that file folder that we used for the main body of the journal. So what I've done here is taken one piece of that file folder, and you'll see that I had the inbuilt spine, so I've left that bit there, and I've cut off everything to the left hand side of it. And on the right hand side, what I've done is scored halfway along that remaining piece to create the central spine. So I've rounded the corners, and I'm just going in now and giving it the Distress Oxide treatment. So I'm starting off with my tea dye, just going all the way around. And then moving up to the slightly darker vintage photo. I'm really sort of bringing that vintage photo in towards the center, because I want this whole piece to look like perhaps a bit of really old kind of leather, or like an old book cover. Obviously that spine section, this is the Re-inforced file folder, so that spine section, one side of that is shiny, so we'll deal with that when we come to that, but this side here, the ink will take on. That shiny bit, the ink won't take on. So I'm going back in now with my tea dye. So I'm just blending that vintage photo in towards the center, and now I am splashing some water on it so that that Distress Oxide will do what it wonderfully does when it reacts with water. So giving it a right good splash, letting that just react for a little bit before I go in with a little bit of kitchen towel and just dab that off. You can see already where that reaction has occurred, just splashing a little bit more water on that there, and dabbing that up again, and just keep doing that until you're happy with it. I'm going back in now with that darker colour, the ground espresso, and just taking that right around the very, very edge. It just adds that really nice kind of finished feeling to it. And doing that central spine as well. Now I want to deal with that kind of shiny bit from the Re-inforced section. So I'm just bringing in this bit of paper from a vintage book. This was, I think this was a book about herbs, and it had this lovely section all about the kind of anatomy of plants. And I just love those little illustrations there. So I'm just placing it where I want it to be on that little flap there, drawing around it, cutting it out. And now I just want to give it that same kind of aged feel as the rest of that little mini folder there. So I've just smushed some of that tea dye onto a little bit of plastic packaging, squirted it with water, and I'm dabbing it in and then drying it off. And now I'm doing the same with a little bit of vintage photo, and finally with a little bit of bundled sage, just to give it that really kind of not just aged look, but the fact that this has been out and about with somebody on their field trips. So you can see now how that's got that extra colour on, and I'm just adding a little bit more texture into the background with that text stamp, just using the bundled sage for that, and now just going in and edging that with the vintage photo. And this is going to go there to cover up that shiny bit like it was never there. So just sticking that down now. I'm just marking a central point on that flap, because this is going to be the closure. So I've just got my eyelet punch there, and I've punched a little hole, popping an eyelet in and just crunching that. So that is going to create the closure. So we're on the inside of the little mini folder now, and I just want to create a little tuck pocket on that inside flap. So I've just got a few, I think this is a bit of Tim Holtz ephemera, I think from Field Notes. So I'm just cutting that down to size and I'm rounding that corner so it fits in that section there. And just gluing as close to the edge as I can so that we get as much room in that pocket as possible. Now I just want to add a few stamps on. Again, I want the feeling that these little notebooks, this folio has been taken out and on all sorts of field trips, and just kind of adding these are all from the Field Notes, Tim Holtz Field Notes stamp set. I'm just wanting to bring that stamping now onto the front part of the journal, so I'm going to start on that little flap there. I think I'm using the ground espresso here, it's just a bit darker just for some of those stamps. So I'm using all three of those colours for my stamping. So the ground espresso, the vintage photo and the tea dye. Just bringing all those colours together. And just adding those nice little details. That's what I like about these stamps. It allows you to add just those little bit of details, that little bit of character in a really easy way. So front cover now, I have got down in that bottom left hand corner there, I have got one of Tracie Fox labels, digital labels that you can download, and that little stamp I've got there is some washi tape, I think from 49 and Market. And I just wafted in front of you there one of my vintage illustrated books that I have fussy cut this bit of leaf and branch out of. That was one of the Reader's Digest books. I had a whole set of different ones, trees and shrubs and butterflies and wildflowers and mammals and all sorts of things. It was wonderful. I got that free from a house clearance. So I just wanted to add a little bit of structure to the front, but also a little pop of colour. So that little green kind of branch and leaf there just kind of felt like it would sit there perfectly. So I fussy cut that out with my craft knife, and I'm just kind of auditioning where things are going to go, thinking where it might need some extra stamps, and remembering that putting things behind each other so it feels like they've built up over years. So some of these stamps you'll notice I'm putting part of the stamp on, I'm putting a bit of that fussy cutting over the top, a label over something underneath it. Layering things like that just makes it feel like it's had that's built up over time, it's that age. I like these little washi stickers because you can also they just sink into the page really, really nicely, and I'm just adding a little bit of that tea dye onto the top there just to help it really kind of sink and settle in so it doesn't feel so kind of stark white. So you can see I've put the stamp there, then I've put the little washi sticker over the top of that stamp. Now I'm going to put that Tracie Fox label over the top of that. So it's all just building that up. It feels like it's been around for a lot longer than the half hour I've been working on it. And now just sticking down that leaf over the top of that stamped area. And I've picked out a couple more of those little Tim Holtz ephemera kind of bits and just popping those in that little section over there. And you'll notice I forgot to video me creating that little notepad there, but it's actually no different to the notepad I created in the last part one of this. So I've literally just torn up some tea-dyed paper to the size to fit. I've poked a couple of holes through with my pokey tool and put some brads through that, just holding that paper in place. There we go, you'll see the brads coming through the back there. You see how this is all starting to come together now. And I'm just going to put a little bit of string through that eyelet hole there to create the closure. Just like that, there we go. So what I want to do now is to cover up that back and create a pocket at the same time. So I've got this bit of paper from the same book that I was using in part 1, and I like the text on that. I like the header. I thought the header is quite nice in terms of creating that pocket. So you'll see I don't do any measuring. I just put the piece of paper in place and fold and either cut or use my ruler to tear to get things to the right size. So you see I want that header to be right in the middle of that, that back page there. So I'm just first of all tearing that down to the right width, and then I'm just taking a bit off the top and a bit off the bottom so that that header is centralized. So I'm just going to find, this is the only time when I measure, is to find the center of something, because I'm not very good at eyeballing. So just finding that center bit on that little flap there, and just using my small hole punch there just to create a little thumb tuck. That's another little bit of ephemera from the Tim Holtz Field Notes pack. Thought that would go quite nicely in that little blank space there. So time to do some inking. Same thing to age this all up. So whilst I'm doing the inking, I'll tell you the other bit that I forgot to video, which was me creating the end on that string closure. So that hole punch I just used to create that thumb notch there, I just cut out, used that to cut out 2 circular pieces of paper and stuck that on the end, so one either side of the string, so that the string was enclosed between like a little sandwich, and aged the paper, stamped on the paper to make it fit in. So nothing particularly special, but I did forget to video it. Sorry about that. So here we go. You can see I've been doing the same thing here as I did on the actual base of the folder and that little flap on the inside, smooshing with the different coloured distressed oxides. Now edging it with the vintage photo, just giving those little mushrooms from the Tim Holtz ephemera pack a little edge as well. There we go. They sit really nicely there. So sticking those on, and then I'm just putting a really small bead of glue on that little flap there, so that closes. And as usual, the legs of my brads are a bit long, so I'm just giving them a little snippy snip before I stick that little pocket in place. Oh, and I've decided to do a little bit of stamping as well. Whatever I've done in one area, I try and repeat, not necessarily the same stamp, but if I've got some stamping, some numbers, whatever, if that's in one area, put it in another area. Again, it brings the whole thing together and helps it feel more complete. Giving it a little extra push over that bit where the brads are, just to make sure that that is sticking properly. This is another one of the little Tracie Fox labels. Again, I'm giving everything the same treatment. That's getting a dip in the Oxide as well. And there was a couple of little bits around the leaf there where there was a little bit of white I hadn't quite fussy cut off. So I'm just going in with my paintbrush and the tea dye Oxide and just covering that up. And here we go. There's that little closure I was telling you about, our little mini journal. Now to turn our attention to how we're going to put the little mini journal in the big journal. So again, another bit of offcut. I'm just cutting it down just to start with, just to try and make it more manageable, so that I can get the right size. So I know I want to have a gusset on this. So that black one that I've just used there is not a cutter, it's a scorer. So I'm just first of all creating some scores to be able to create a bit of a gusset. So 2 scores, not very far apart, just to create a gusset deep enough for that little mini folder to sit in. And I actually wanted it to be slightly narrower than that spine that it's up against, so that it's not going to stop that flap from closing. So you can see that spine there is a little narrower than the spine on the flap there. So I'm just lining this up and seeing how big I want it to be before I make my next score and cut. So making that first score and moving it along just a little bit. I'm not very good at numbers. My neurodivergent brain isn't very good at measuring in numbers, so I literally use the lines on that cutting board there. I move along one line rather than looking at the numbers and measurements. So what I have now is this little pocket that we've created. Just by lining everything up, creating those little gussets there, folding it in. Here it is. And now I've just kind of cut those little extra bits, those little squares out of the bottom there, so everything folds together better. And now bringing in the Distress Oxide. So starting off with the tea dye, you guys know what's happening next. The vintage photo will come in. Particularly focusing on the little kind of spiny bits, because I think that's really where things age, isn't it? We see that on the folds of things and it makes quite a difference. And of course I want to matte this page as well, back with my book page, which is getting a bit too delicate for my trimmer to use. So I am going to use my steel rule and my scalpel just to cut this page down to fit that front of the pocket there. And just giving that a little bit of the Distress Oxide treatment as well. Adding that slightly darker detail that you get from doing the smoosh. And of course when you do that smoosh, it will activate a little bit of that Distress Oxide that I've put on already, and you can see there I've added the green as well. And now just using my glue stick, just stick that in place. I'm just looking at that section there and thinking it'd be nice to have something on it so that it's not quite so plain. So I'm checking how it looks on the page with everything else before I make that decision. And yes, it can certainly do with something just to bring that, just to bring it to life a little bit. So I've pulled out some more Tracie Fox labels and this little flower from one of the pages of that book. And just putting it in place, making a few marks, and I'm just going to cut that to size. Off screen, sorry about that, here we go. I like the torn section at the bottom, so I'm going to leave that torn. But I just wanted those edges that are going up against the edge of the pocket to fit straight. I need to take a teeny tiny bit off. There's no way my paper trimmer will do that. So again, I'm back with the scalpel and my steel rule. collage with some of these labels. And again, just like with our stamps, we don't have to use the whole bit of the stamp. We can use it in conjunction with another one and layer it. With these kind of digital downloads, these labels, you know, you don't have to use it exactly as it is. You can cut bits off. I'll quite often print 2 sheets to a page so that they're smaller, so I get different sizes as well. So here we go, here's our aged bit of book page there. But I've aged the labels in the same way, so a bit of Distress Oxide and then a little bit of dabbing them in the smooshed ink as well before sticking those on. Really simple little bit of collage there that just really transforms that pocket into something a bit more special. And lastly, a little stamp. And I decided to use score tape to stick this down because I thought it's just going to need that bit of extra strength. So double-sided tape, just putting that on the flaps here. Much easier to tear it with my ruler than I do try and cut it with my scissors, otherwise it sticks to the scissors. Just trimming off any little excess bits. And then what I'm going to do first of all is that bottom part of the pocket. I am just going to pull the edges back on that and stick the side flaps to it. It just makes it easier to put it in place if those flaps are already stuck down, otherwise you're trying to hold too many things in place at once. So, time to stick this in the journal. So just removing the backing tape. And you can see I made that pocket slightly smaller than the space. So again, it just means it's not going to interfere with that flap opening and closing. Just using my ruler just to get in there and push that down to make sure it has connected properly with the page beneath. And there we go. Our little mini journal fits in that space beautifully. So we've got 2 nice little elements here, interactive elements, starting to bring this journal to life. So next time we are going to focus on the other side, that other flap. We are going to be looking at what we can do to really bring that bit to life as well. So we've got some pockets, we've got some belly bands. So I will look forward to seeing you in part 3 when we are looking over there. I hope you've enjoyed it. See you soon.